The market of Vel Thar opened at dawn, when the twin suns of the Kethani system climbed above the horizon ridge and turned the pale dust of the plaza the color of old copper. Ethan Cole had been living on Vel Thar Station for 11 months, long enough to know which vendor sold the real protein supplements and which one sold chalk powder in the same packaging, long enough to recognize the sounds of the transit docks by pitch alone, the low hydraulic groan of a cargo lifter, the sharp whistle of a pressurized seal, the particular silence that fell when a customs officer appeared, long enough to have stopped noticing the stares. He was human. There were perhaps 40 humans on a station of 12,000. They were noticed. He carried a crate of calibration tools from the transit dock toward the engineering bay on sublevel 4, taking the long route through the market because the short route smelled like something that had died inside a fuel cell, and because he was not in a hurry. He was never in a hurry. It was one of the things his supervisor, a Kethani male named Sarev, found either admirable or suspicious, depending on the day. The market was busy. The Kethani moved through it in their particular way, flowing, unhurried, their pale silver-blue skin catching the copper morning light, their secondary eyelids half-closed against the glare. They were a tall species, most of them, with long fingers and faces that expressed emotion primarily through the chromatophore patterns along their jaw and throat. Anger was deep violet. Contentment was a pale wash of gold. Grief was something Ethan had only seen once, and he hadn't understood it until someone explained it to him later. The color had been white. He was cutting between a spice stall and a textile merchant when he almost walked into her. She was standing very still in the middle of the thoroughfare, which was notable because everyone else was moving around her the way water flows around a stone, not stopping to help her, not asking what was wrong, just flowing past, with the particular practiced efficiency of people who have decided that something is not their problem, or perhaps worse, that it is not something they are permitted to acknowledge. She was Kethani, shorter than average. Her skin was not the standard silver blue of the population around her, but a warmer shade, something between silver and pale amber, a genetic variance Ethan had seen in maybe a dozen individuals on the station. Her hair was dark and pulled back. She was wearing the plain wrap cloth of a lower market vendor, and she was holding a display tablet in both hands, and the display tablet had been cracked, recently, from the look of it, because the fracture lines still had a fresh sheer quality, and she was staring at it with an expression Ethan could not read because he still sometimes struggled with Kethani facial markers. But her throat was white. He stopped. In 11 months, he had learned what that meant. He set his crate down on the edge of the pathway, stepped out of the main flow of foot traffic and looked at her for a moment. Then he said, in his best approximation of Kethani standard, "Are you hurt?" She looked up. Her eyes were an unusual color too, a deep amber that matched her skin's warm undertone, where most Kethani eyes were silver gray or pale blue. She looked at him the way someone looks at an unexpected sound in an empty room, startled, then calculating, then very carefully neutral. "No," she said, her Kethani standard was crisp formal register. "I am not hurt." "Your tablet is broken." "I am aware." He looked around. The market flowed past them both. Nobody was looking at her, which was itself a kind of looking, the deliberate not looking of people who have made a decision. "Do you need help?" he asked. A very long pause. The white in her throat deepened momentarily, then faded toward something faint and gray. "Humans," she said carefully, "are not familiar with Kethani contract law." "No," he agreed, "I'm not." "Then you would not understand why help, in this situation, is not a straightforward thing to offer." He looked at the cracked tablet again, looked at the way everyone was flowing past her, looked at the white still visible at the base of her throat. "Probably not," he said, "but I've got time, and I've got a crate that isn't going anywhere." He nudged it with his boot. "My name is Ethan. I work in sublevel 4 engineering, and I'm asking if you need help." She looked at him for a long moment. "My name is Sarah Vell," she said, "and I suspect that if I explain my situation to you, you will walk away." "Maybe," he said, "but I won't walk away before you explain it." Her situation, as it turned out, was this. In Kethani society, at least in the Vel-Thar station community, which had its own particular social customs shaped by 3 generations of closed-orbit living, a female of marrying age who had been formally refused by 3 bond candidates entered a legal status called Velara. Untranslatable directly, but Sarah translated it for him as something like outside the consideration of suitable males. It was not technically a punishment. It was a legal categorization. It meant that no Kethani male in good standing was permitted to enter into a bond claim with her without going through a formal challenge process. A process so expensive and socially costly that in practice, no one ever did. "Why were you refused?" he asked. They had moved to the edge of the market, sitting on a low wall near a water reclamation unit. He had bought 2 cups of something hot and vaguely bitter from a stall nearby, and she was holding hers with both hands without drinking it. "Because of my variance," she said. She gestured briefly at her skin, her eyes. "The amber phenotype is a recessive expression. It is associated in old Kethani genetics tradition with instability. It is not a medical classification. It is a social one. But on this station, the social classifications are enforced as rigorously as medical ones. So they refused you because of your skin color. And my eyes, and my mother's history, and because the first candidate who refused me did so loudly, and the other 2 followed his lead rather than risk association with his judgment." A pause. "The 3rd candidate broke my contract display tablet before returning it to me. He did it in front of witnesses. It was a deliberate signal." Ethan looked at the cracked tablet in her hands. "A signal of what?" "That I was so far beneath consideration that he could not even be bothered to perform the standard refusal with dignity." Her voice was very even. The chromatophore pattern at her jaw was carefully still. It was efficient. "The 3rd refusal completes the Velara classification. He achieved the signal and the classification simultaneously." The market continued around them, copper light, the smell of spices and machine oil. "What does Velara mean for your life?" he asked, practically. "I cannot maintain a vendor license without a bond partner. My vendor license expires in 31 days. Without it, I cannot legally operate my business. Without my business, I cannot maintain my station residency permit. Without my residency permit," she stopped. "You'd have to leave the station." "Yes." He looked at the tablet again, at the deliberate clean fracture lines. "What was your business?" Something shifted in her expression. Not grief this time, something more complicated. "Medicines," she said. "I am a trained compound pharmacist. I produce medication for the lower quarter. There are approximately 300 residents in the lower quarter who use medications I compound. Some of them are Kethani. Most of them are non-Kethani, Velshii, Dreni, 2 humans. The standard station pharmacy does not carry medications formulated for their specific physiology profiles. I do." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "So if you leave," he said, 300 people lose access to their medications. "The station pharmacy has assured me they will attempt to source alternatives." Her voice was absolutely neutral. "They have been assuring me of this for approximately 6 months since the first refusal. They have not yet sourced any alternatives." He looked at his hands, looked at the market, looked at the white still faintly visible at her throat, which he now understood was not grief but something steadier and harder. The color, he suspected, of someone who has been enduring something for a long time. "What would happen," he said slowly, "if a non-Kethani submitted a bond claim?" She turned to look at him. The morning light caught her amber eyes. "That," she said carefully, "is a more complicated question than you realize. Equals. Part 2. The Law He Shouldn't Have Read. He read it anyway. Sublevel 4 engineering had a good network terminal, and Ethan had always been the kind of person who, when told a thing was complicated, went and found out exactly how complicated it was before deciding whether he cared. Kethani Bond Law, specifically the Vel-Thar Station adaptation, which had diverged from planetary Kethani code in several significant ways over 3 generations, was dense. It was written in legal Kethani, which was a different register from standard, and his translation software was imperfect. He spent 4 hours with it, cross-referencing the translation uncertainties with the station legal library's public access commentary. What he found was this. The Velara classification had been designed, originally, as a protection, a way of preventing families from pressuring a female into an unsuitable bond against her will. A female in Velara could not be claimed by anyone in her family's social network without her explicit consent, and the formal challenge process required an independent tribunal review. Somewhere in the last 2 generations on the station, it had been turned inside out. The challenge process that was meant to protect women had become a wall. The tribunal review that was meant to be independent was drawn from the station's senior bond council, which was composed entirely of senior Kethani males in good standing. A non-Kethani who submitted a bond claim under Velara conditions was, technically, permitted to do so. But they had to survive the challenge process. The challenge process, for non-Kethani claimants, involved 3 things. First, a formal public declaration before the Bond Council, which was humiliating by design, structured to give the Council maximum opportunity to reject the claim on procedural grounds. Second, an open challenge period of 14 days, during which any Kethani male could contest the claim by combat proxy, which meant hiring a licensed station arbitration fighter to compete in a formal challenge bout. Third, a final tribunal judgment, in which the council could reject the claim even if the claimant had survived the first 2 stages, on grounds of cultural incompatibility. Historically, the cultural incompatibility clause had never been invoked against a Kethani claimant. It had been invoked against every non-Kethani claimant who had reached stage 3. There had been 6 non-Kethani claimants in the station's history. All 6 had been rejected at stage 3. Ethan read this. Then he read it again. Then he sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling of sublevel 4 engineering for a while. His supervisor Sarev appeared in the doorway. "You are staring at the ceiling," Sarev observed. "I do that sometimes. You have been on the network terminal for 4 hours. Your calibration report is unfinished." "I'll finish it tonight." A pause. "Sarev, you've been on this station your whole life, right?" Sarev's chromatophores shifted to a cautious amber green. "Yes." "Do you know a woman named Sarah Vel, lower quarter, compound pharmacist?" A long pause. The amber green deepened toward something more guarded. "I know of her," Sarev said carefully. "What do you know?" "I know she was refused. I know she is Velara." Another pause. "I know that Drevath Vel, the 3rd candidate who broke her tablet, is the son of Senior Counselor Drevath Khan. I know that Senior Counselor Drevath Khan chairs the Bond Council Tribunal." He stopped. "Ethan. Whatever you are thinking." "I haven't said what I'm thinking." "You are a human who has been reading Bond law for 4 hours. I have some guesses about what you are thinking." Ethan looked at the ceiling again. The 6 non-Kethani who tried the challenge process before, what happened to them after they were rejected? Sarev was quiet for a moment. 2 of them left the station voluntarily. One was deported on a separate residency violation, a violation that appeared in his file approximately 3 days after his rejection. One was injured in the combat proxy bout and required significant medical care. She survived but could not afford to remain on the station afterward. A pause. The remaining 2 were found in violation of various station regulations over the following months. Both eventually left. The council manufactured violations. I did not say that. You described it. Sarev's chromatophores went very still. Ethan, the woman is not Kethani amber phenotype by choice. The council has been hostile to amber phenotype individuals for 20 years. The Vel family has been specifically targeted because Sarah's mother was an advocate for phenotype equality who embarrassed senior counselor Drevath Can publicly approximately 15 years ago, and Kethani's social memory is very long. He paused. This is not a simple situation that a human with good intentions can resolve. I know, Ethan said. And yet. Sarev looked at him for a long moment. His chromatophores moved through a complex sequence Ethan couldn't fully read, something between resignation and a kind of reluctant, careful warmth. If you do this, Sarev said finally, you will need a bond law advocate. I know one. She is expensive and she is Kethani and she will think you are insane, but she is the best on the station and she is not affiliated with any of the council families. He paused. I will give you her contact. Ethan looked at him. Why? Because Sarah Vel has been compounding my wife's medication for 6 years, Sarev said quietly, and because what was done to her family was wrong, and because I am a coward who has been watching it happen and doing nothing, and perhaps I am tired of being a coward. He turned toward the door. Finish your calibration report, Ethan. He went to see Sarah the next morning. Her workspace was in the lower quarter, a narrow shopfront between a Velshii food vendor and a station water access point. Inside, it was precise and ordered in a way that reminded him of something he couldn't immediately name. Every compound labeled and dated, every instrument in its place, a small reference library of physical text tablets on a shelf above the work counter. Clean, cared for, the workspace of someone who took their work seriously. She was at the counter when he came in, measuring something into a small container with the focused attention of someone who has done this 10,000 times and still treats each instance as if it matters. She looked up when the door opened, saw him. Set down her measuring tool with deliberate care. You read the law, she said. It wasn't a question. I did. And you are here. I am. She looked at him for a long moment. In the morning light of the lower quarter, softer here, the sun's light filtered through 3 levels of station superstructure. Her amber skin had a warm, almost luminous quality. Her expression was complicated, cautious, tired, and underneath both of those things, something that might have been the carefully suppressed memory of hope. 6 non-Kethani have tried the challenge process, she said. All 6 were rejected. Some were harmed. I know. Drevath Can chairs the tribunal. His son was the one who broke my tablet. I know. You are a human with no political standing on the station, no bond council connections, and no combat proxy experience. I know that too. Then why, she said carefully, are you here? He thought about how to answer that. He thought about the cracked tablet, the deliberate fracture lines, the white in her throat, 300 people who needed medication they couldn't get anywhere else, the 6 claimants before him and what had happened to them. Because someone should be, he said, and because I'd rather try something hard and fail than not try it and always know I didn't. A very long silence. You understand, she said, that if you submit a bond claim, the bond is real. It is not a legal fiction. Under Kethani law, if the claim is accepted, it creates a genuine bond partnership. It does not expire if my situation improves. You cannot submit it as a temporary measure. I understand that. You are human, I am Kethani. The cultural distance is significant. I know. You met me yesterday. I know that too. She looked at him. Her chromatophores were still, the stillness of someone working very hard to keep them still. Why should I permit you to do this, she said, It was not a hostile question. It was a genuine one. Why should I allow a stranger to put himself at risk for my situation? You shouldn't permit me or not permit me, he said. It's not your decision to make. I'm an adult. So are you. You can tell me you don't want this, that's different. He paused. Do you not want this? Another long silence. I don't know yet, she said honestly. I don't know you. Then let me fix that, he said. You have 31 days before your license expires. It takes 7 days to file a claim and have it officially registered. That leaves 24 days before I'd have to decide whether to file. Tell me how to understand you in 24 days and then decide. She looked at him for a very long time. That, she said finally, is the most Cathani-structured proposal I have ever heard from a human. I've been here 11 months, he said. Some things sink in. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, something quieter and more careful than that. A slight softening around the eyes. The faintest wash of gold at the edge of her jaw. There, and gone so quickly he almost missed it. I begin compound preparation at the 6th hour, she said. If you want to understand what I do, you can come at the 6th hour. You will not touch anything without instruction, and you will not speak when I am measuring. Agreed, he said. And you will tell me why you are really on the station. Humans do not typically take engineering postings on remote Cathani stations without a reason. He looked at her. That's a fair trade. Good, she said. She turned back to her counter and picked up her measuring tool. Come at the 6th hour, Ethan. ===. Part 3, 24 days. He came at the 6th hour. He came the next day at the 6th hour, and the day after that, and the day after that. He did not touch anything without instruction. He did not speak when she was measuring. He learned the names of compounds and their purposes, learned which residents came in and why, learned the particular language of the lower quarter, which was not quite the language of the rest of the station, softer at the edges, more mixed with Velshii and Drenni loanwords, the dialect of people who had been living on the station's margins long enough to build their own vocabulary. He told her why he was on Velthar Station. He told her on the 4th day, when they were sitting in the narrow space behind the shopfront where she kept her reference library, eating a midday meal from containers she had brought from somewhere. He never found out where, but it was always good, which surprised him, because he had assumed the lower quarter food vendors would be limited. My daughter, he said. Sarah looked up from her container. I had a daughter, she was 12. She was sick, a genetic condition, rare in humans, something that affects the myelin sheath. There are treatments. On Earth, the waiting list for the best treatment was 3 years. I was trying to find alternatives, research postings, anything that would let me access different medical networks. He paused. She died 14 months ago. A month before I came to Velthar. Silence. I'm sorry, she said, simply, quietly, without performance. The posting was already arranged, he said. I came anyway. I didn't have anywhere else to be. He looked at his hands. I think I came because doing something was easier than doing nothing, even if the something didn't make sense anymore. It makes sense, she said. Does it? Yes. She looked at her reference library, the rows of physical text tablets, precise and ordered. After my mother died, she died 3 years ago. Heart failure. Nothing connected to the council or the phenotype situation. Simply the body stopping. I continued compounding for 2 months before I realized I had been doing it without awareness. Getting up, coming to the shop, working, closing. My hands knew what to do when I did not. She paused. The hands remember, even when the rest of us is somewhere else. He looked at her. Your mother was an advocate, he said, for phenotype equality. Yes. The council's hostility to you. Is it really about the genetics, or is it mostly about her? A long pause. The amber gold in her skin caught the low light of the back room. Both, she said. The genetics gave them a pretext. My mother gave them a motive. I am the intersection of both, which makes me very convenient. She said it without bitterness, the way someone states a fact they have examined from every angle and found to be simply true. She knew they would eventually turn their attention to me. She told me before she died to be very careful. I was careful. Not careful enough. What would she think, he said carefully, about what we're doing? Sarah was quiet for a moment. She would think it was dangerous, she said. She would be right. A pause. She would also say that every bond she ever saw that was worth anything started with someone doing something dangerous. The faintest wash of gold again, there and gone. She had very particular views about what a partnership should be. What views? She said a partnership should be between equals who choose each other with clear eyes, not because of obligation or family pressure or the social cost of refusing. She looked at him. She would be very interested in you, Ethan Cole. Would she like me? I don't know yet, she said. Neither do I. A pause, and then something in her expression shifted, that careful, suppressed quality, the one that might have been the memory of hope, becoming something slightly less suppressed. But I am beginning to find out. On the 8th day, a man came into the shop. He was Kethani, tall, silver blue, with the kind of bone structure that suggested he had been told. He was handsome so many times that he had stopped questioning it. He wore station administrative level clothing. He looked at Ethan with the particular blank wall expression of someone who has decided not to acknowledge a presence. He looked at Sarah and said, in rapid Kethani standard, "My father sends his regards. He asks whether you have reconsidered the relocation offer." Sarah continued labeling a compound without looking up. "I have not. The offer includes a full transportation grant and a residency certificate for Outer Station 7. Outer Station 7 has a population of approximately 400. It does not have a medical compound facility. My skills would be wasted there." "Your skills," he said, "are not the primary concern." "No," she said evenly. "Your father's comfort is the primary concern." She looked up then, directly at him. "Tell Counselor Drevath Khan that I am aware of the relocation offer. I am also aware that the transportation grant he offered is precisely equal to the sum my mother donated to the Phenotype Advocacy Fund in the year before her death, which fund the council then dissolved, and the records of which your father claims do not exist." A pause. "Tell him I keep very good records." The man's chromatophores went a sharp, brief violet. He looked at Ethan, really looked at him. For the first time, the blank wall expression replaced by something more pointed. "This is the human," he said. "Ethan Cole," Ethan said pleasantly. "Sublevel 4 engineering, nice to meet you." Another violet flash, then the man left. Sarah returned to her labeling. "Drevath Vel," she said, "the third candidate. The one who broke the tablet. I figured. He will report to his father that you have been here regularly." She paused. "The council will begin building a file on you." "I know." She looked at him then, a sharp, assessing look. "You are not afraid." "I didn't say that." He paused. "I just don't think being afraid is a reason to stop." The gold at her jaw, steadier this time, lasting almost 3 seconds before she controlled it. On the 15th day, the advocate came. Her name was Preva, and she was small and old, and had the chromatophore patterns of someone who had been arguing for so long that the patterns had settled into a permanent state of tactical readiness. She arrived at the shop in the early morning and looked at Ethan with the expression of someone assessing a piece of equipment, whose quality she had been told to assume was sufficient, and intends to verify personally. "You understand the process," she said, "not a question." "Formal declaration, 14-day challenge period, tribunal judgment," he said. "The formal declaration will be structured to humiliate you. The council's clerk will ask questions designed to make you appear culturally ignorant. Do not try to prove your cultural knowledge. It will make you look defensive. Answer questions simply, in full sentences, with no elaboration unless elaboration serves you. Understood. The challenge period. You will need to hire a combat proxy fighter. I have one in mind, licensed, experienced, and has a history of competing against council family proxies. She is not cheap. I have savings, he said. You will spend them. A pause. If you survive the challenge period, the tribunal will invoke the cultural incompatibility clause. They have done this every time a non-Kethani has reached stage 3. When they do, I will challenge the clause on the grounds that it has been applied in a pattern consistent with systematic discrimination against non-Kethani claimants, and I will request a review by the Regional Governance Authority. She looked at him steadily. This will make the council very angry. Good, he said. It will also take time. The RGA review process takes a minimum of 60 days. During that time, Sarah's residency permit will be in jeopardy. Can she operate under a provisional status during the review? Preva looked at him with the expression of someone slightly revising an assessment upward. You did read the law. I tried to. Yes, she can apply for provisional status under the RGA review umbrella. It is not automatic. I will file for it simultaneously. She paused. There is one other thing. The council may attempt to bypass the tribunal process entirely by charging you with a station regulation violation before you reach stage 3. I would advise you to be very careful about regulations. No speed violations in transit corridors. No unauthorized access to any station areas. No disputes with council-affiliated vendors. My supervisor told me the same thing. Sarev, yes, he contacted me. She looked at him. He is a coward who is trying to be braver than he has been. I will take that. She closed her information tablet. File on day 23, not before. I will send you the paperwork. She left. Sarah, who had been standing at her counter throughout, was quiet for a moment. She is very expensive, she said. I know. You are spending your savings on this. Yes. For someone you have known for 15 days. He looked at her. In the low morning light of the lower quarter, amber and gold, with the careful steadiness she wore like a second skin, the steadiness of someone who has learned not to hope too visibly in case the hope gets used against them. For someone I'm getting to know, he said, and for 300 people who need their medication. The gold at her jaw was not brief this time. It stayed. Ethan, she said. Yes. A pause. She looked at her hands, the hands that knew what to do even when the rest of her was somewhere else. I want to tell you something, she said. Not because you need to know it before day 23, but because I think you should know it. Okay. When you sat down on the wall with me in the market, she said. When you bought me the bitter tea and asked what my situation was, I had already decided by the time we spoke that I would leave, that I would accept the relocation offer, go to Outer Station 7, find some other use for my skills. She paused. I had decided this because I could not see another option, because no Kethani was going to help me, and I could not imagine that a non-Kethani would understand the law well enough to try, and even if they understood the law, the risk. She stopped. Started again. I had decided to stop trying. He was quiet. And then a human sat down on a wall, she said, and asked if I needed help, and did not walk away when I explained why help was complicated. She looked at him directly. I want you to know that. Whatever happens with the council, whatever the tribunal decides, I want you to know that you changed something for me that morning, before the claim, before the law, before any of this. You changed something. He looked at her for a long moment. Thank you for telling me that, he said. Thank you, she said, for sitting down. Part 4, the Declaration. On day 23, Ethan Cole walked into the Vel Thar Station Bond Council chamber and submitted a formal claim for Sarah Vel. The chamber was designed for intimidation. High ceilings, pale stone, the 7 council seats elevated above the floor level. The lighting was calibrated to make the person on the floor feel small. Ethan had been in worse spaces. The hospital waiting rooms of his daughters last year, the particular gray light of those rooms, the particular weight of those chairs. This was just a room. Preva stood to his left. Sarah stood behind the gallery railing. She was not permitted to stand beside him for the declaration, which was itself a statement about how the process was designed. Senior Counselor Drevath sat in the center seat. He was old and silver-haired, and had the bone structure of a man who had always expected to be looked at. His chromatophores were a careful diplomatic gold, the gold of a man performing benevolence. The clerk, young, nervous, reading from a formal script, began. Do you, Ethan Cole, human citizen, hold a station residency permit in good standing? Yes. Are you free of any existing bond claim or bond partnership under any governing legal system? Yes. Do you understand that a bond claim submitted under the Velara provision is subject to formal challenge and tribunal review? Yes. Do you understand the cultural responsibilities of a Kethani bond partnership as codified in Vel Thar Station Bond Law, Section 4 through Section 11? I have read Sections 4 through 11, Ethan said. I understand them. The clerk hesitated. This was, apparently, not the answer he had expected. He glanced up from his script, then back down. Do you speak Kethani standard at a sufficient level to participate in bond partnership cultural practices? My Kethani standard is functional. I am continuing to improve it. Another hesitation. The clerk was off script now. Senior Counselor Drevath leaned forward. His diplomatic gold chromatophores didn't flicker. I have a question, he said, his voice the smooth, measured tone of a man who knows he controls the room. You have been on this station for 11 months. You met the petitioner 8 days before your claim was filed. Is this correct? I met Sarah Vell in the market 23 days ago, Ethan said. I have spent a significant portion of that time learning about her work and her situation. I have also been on this station for 11 months, during which time I have lived in the lower quarter, purchased medication from her shop, and was aware of her reputation as a pharmacist before we met. The counselor's chromatophore stayed gold. A good poker player, Ethan thought. You are human, the counselor said. Do you find it unusual to be submitting a bond claim to a Kethani woman? I find it unusual, Ethan said, that the woman I am claiming for has been refused by 3 candidates for reasons unrelated to her character, her skills, or her value as a partner. I find that more unusual than the species difference. A very brief violet flash across the counselor's jaw, gone almost instantly. The claim is registered, Preva said smoothly, stepping forward slightly. The challenge period begins as of today. We note for the record that Advocate Preva Vel Thar files simultaneously under Council Provision 7-2, challenging any application of the Cultural Incompatibility Clause on grounds of systematic discriminatory application in all 6 prior non-Kethani claims. The clerk was staring at his script. The script had no guidance for this. The counselor looked at Preva for a long moment. The challenge period begins, he said. His voice was still smooth. The council will review the advocate's filing in due course. Part 5, 14 days. They came on day 3. A station compliance officer appeared at Sublevel 4 Engineering with a notice of inspection. Routine review, the notice said, but the inspection targeted Ethan's specific workstation and tool inventory, which was not how routine reviews were conducted. His tools were all correctly tagged, his workspace was correctly certified, his permit was current. The inspection lasted 4 hours and found nothing. They came again on day 7. A different approach this time. A council-affiliated vendor in the upper market filed a complaint alleging that Ethan had obstructed their stall access during a market visit 3 weeks prior. The complaint was detailed and specific, including times and a description of Ethan's crate. Ethan had his sub-level 4 access logs for that day. He had been underground for the entire period described. Sarev confirmed it in writing within 2 hours. The complaint was dismissed. The combat proxy bout was on day 9. The council family had hired a large, experienced arbitration fighter, a Kethani male who had won 11 of his last 14 bouts. Preva's fighter was Drenny, smaller and faster, with a particular reputation for endurance. The bout was public. A significant crowd gathered. Ethan stood in the upper gallery and watched without expression, because the one thing he had promised himself was that he would not let them see him afraid, and he was afraid deeply, genuinely afraid that this was going to end with someone getting hurt, that this machine he had set in motion was going to crush someone. The Drenny fighter won in 41 minutes. Afterward, Sarah was standing beside him in the gallery and she said nothing, just stood close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence, and after a moment, her hand found his hand on the gallery railing and held it. Neither of them said anything. After a while she said, "My mother would have liked this part." The fighting. The holding, she said quietly. On day 14, the challenge period closed. No further challenges had been filed. The compliance complaints had been exhausted. The combat challenge had been won. The tribunal was scheduled for 6 days hence. In the evenings of those 6 days, they sat in the back room of her shop after closing and she taught him Kethani bond customs. Not because he needed to perform them for the tribunal, but because, she said, if this worked, he would want to know them. He learned that Kethani bond partnerships had 3 formal stages: the declaration, the settling period, and the confirmation. The settling period was typically a year, during which partners lived separately but spent structured time together, learning each other's rhythms. The confirmation was a community ceremony. "We would be doing this backward," she said. "The law requires the claim and the declaration before the settling period can begin, but we have already been in something like a settling period." "Have we?" She looked at him. Her amber eyes in the low evening light of the back room were very steady. "You have been coming to the 6th hour every day for 23 days, she said. "You have learned to identify 17 compounds by smell. You have learned when I prefer silence and when I prefer conversation. You have learned that I take my midday meal at the 12th hour exactly and become unreasonable if it is late." A pause. "I have learned that you drink your morning beverage too quickly. I have learned that you solve problems by reading everything available rather than asking for help, which is efficient but occasionally inefficient. I have learned that you get quiet when something matters to you, which is the opposite of most people, who get louder." He looked at her. "I have learned," she said more quietly, "that you sat down on a wall and asked if I needed help, and that you read a law that everyone told you was complicated, and that you spent your savings, and that you watched a combat bout with your jaw set in a particular way that I now know means you are afraid but have decided not to be. Preva told me the not visibly afraid strategy. I know she told me too." A pause. "I'm telling you that I saw through the strategy and that I was very glad it was there anyway." He looked at his hands, the hands that had stayed busy these 11 months, the hands that had known what to do when the rest of him didn't. "Sarah," he said. "Yes. Whatever happens in the tribunal, I want you to know something too." "Tell me." "I came here because I didn't have anywhere else to be. I stayed because of the posting, but I don't want to leave this station anymore. That started before the claim, before the law. It started in the back room of your shop at the 12th hour, eating food from containers and talking about your mother and mine." He paused. "I don't know what that means yet. I think we both need time to find out what it means, but I wanted you to know it exists." The gold in her chromatophores was very warm, very steady. "I know it exists," she said. "I have been watching it exist for 23 days. A pause. "Ethan," she said. "Yes." "The confirmation ceremony," she said carefully. "The community ceremony. It is typically held at the end of the settling year, but the Kethani tradition says the partners can hold a private confirmation, small, only the two of them at any point during the settling period if both choose it." She looked at him. "It is not legally binding. It is not for the council. It is just a promise between two people." He looked at her. "After the tribunal," she said, "whatever happens, I would like to do that." "So would I," he said. The gold in her throat was luminous now, unhidden, unchecked. Outside, the lower quarter was settling into its evening sounds, the Velshii vendor closing up, the water access unit cycling through its nightly maintenance, the distant hum of the station's structural heartbeat. Part 6. The Tribunal. The council chamber was more crowded for the tribunal than it had been for the declaration. Word had gotten out, through what channels, Ethan wasn't entirely sure, but the gallery was full. Residents from the lower quarter, most of them. Velshii Drenny, a handful of Kethani who had bought medication from Sarah's shop for years, and were watching with the particular fierce quiet of people who know they cannot intervene but want to be present anyway. Sarev was there. He stood in the gallery with his hands behind his back, and his chromatophores in the careful neutral of a man who has decided that being there is as far as his courage presently extends, which Ethan thought was more than enough. Preva stood at the claimant's table. Ethan stood beside her. Sarah was in the gallery, directly in his sightline. Senior Counselor Drevath can open the proceedings with the formal language of the bond code, which Ethan now knew well enough to follow without translation software. The council went through the stages, verified the claim registration, verified the combat proxy outcome, verified the absence of sustained compliance violations. Then the counselor leaned forward. "Under Bond Code Provision 14, the tribunal may decline to confirm a claim on grounds of cultural incompatibility," he said. "The council finds that the cultural distance between a human claimant and a Kethani petitioner constitutes grounds for." "I formally challenge the application of Provision 14, Preva said. Her voice cut through the chamber like something sharpened. "On grounds that Provision 14 has been applied in every previous non-Kethani claim to reach this stage, in a pattern that constitutes systematic discriminatory use, in contravention of Regional Governance Authority Equality Provisions 7 through 9. I simultaneously submit a request for RGA review and request provisional status for the petitioner under RGA Review Umbrella Provision 3. She placed her information tablet on the council table. "The documentation is filed." The chamber was very quiet. The counselor looked at the tablet. His gold chromatophores were very still. "The RGA review process," Preva continued, "will examine all 6 prior non-Kethani claims. It will also examine the pattern of compliance complaints filed against the current claimant during the challenge period, all of which were dismissed. It will examine the residency violations filed against previous non-Kethani claimants after their rejections. It will examine the relationship between council decisions and the amber phenotype advocacy history of the petitioner's mother." She paused. "The counselor may wish to consult with his legal representatives before proceeding." Another silence. Ethan stood still. He had been told by Preva, by Sarev, by everyone who had any sense of how this station worked, that the counselor would not back down, that the RGA review was a long shot, that Preva's strategy was the best available move, not a guaranteed winning one. But he also knew something he hadn't told Preva, because he hadn't been sure if it was relevant. He had good records. He had spent 11 months in Sublevel 4 engineering, with access to the maintenance and infrastructure networks. And in the process of reading bond law, he had followed a thread, a small, almost invisible thread, into the station's financial records, which were technically public, technically accessible, technically within the scope of his engineering clearance in ways that were not entirely straightforward but were not, strictly speaking, unauthorized. He had found a fund, a medical compound supply fund, established in the station's founding charter, designed to ensure that the lower quarter had access to medication. The fund had been dormant for 20 years. It had been classified as a discontinued program in the administrative records. But it hadn't been dissolved. It had been reclassified. The money was still there. It had simply been redirected into an infrastructure maintenance budget that had been allocated over the past 15 years, primarily to upper market projects in areas controlled by council family vendors. He had given this information to Preva 3 days ago. He had told her to use it if she needed it. She used it now. Additionally, Preva said, I submit documentation related to the Station Medical Compound Supply Fund, Charter Provision 22. The fund has been active, contrary to administrative classifications, for the duration of its alleged discontinuation. The petitioner's compound pharmacy has, for 6 years, been providing services that are the legal responsibility of this fund. The Council may wish to consider the regulatory implications of having redirected a public health fund for private infrastructure benefit. The chamber was very quiet for a long time. Ethan did not look at the counselor. He looked at Sarah, in the gallery, who was watching him with the particular focused attention of someone watching something that matters. He could not read her chromatophores from this distance, but her face, which he had spent 23 days learning, was very still and very intent. Senior Counselor Drevath looked at the table. He looked at Preva's tablet. He looked at the gallery. He looked at Ethan. His gold chromatophores flickered just for a moment, just enough to see a deep, brief white. Then they went back to gold. The tribunal, he said carefully, will take a recess to review the advocate's submissions. The recess lasted 3 hours. Ethan and Preva waited in an anteroom. Sarah had come down from the gallery and was sitting with them. Nobody talked very much. At one point Sarah said, "The fund." "Yes," Ethan said. "How did you find it?" "Carefully." A long pause. "My mother knew about the fund," she said quietly. "She documented the redirection. She couldn't prove it without access to the full financial records, and she didn't have that access." A pause. "Where did she put her documentation?" "In the Phenotype Advocacy Archive, which is technically still a registered document set in the station library, even though the council declared the fund dissolved." He paused. "Legal Cathani is dense, but it's consistent. Things don't disappear if they were properly filed. They just get classified as inactive." She looked at him. "You found my mother's work," she said. "I found the thread she'd already pulled," he said. "I just followed it the rest of the way." The gold in her jaw was very warm. She reached out and put her hand over his. They waited. When the tribunal reconvened, Senior Counselor Drevath read the ruling in a voice that was very carefully controlled. The cultural incompatibility clause would not be invoked. The claim was confirmed. He did not elaborate, he did not explain. The ruling was 3 sentences and a formal seal, read in the tone of a man who has calculated the exact cost of a retreat and decided that this particular retreat was preferable to the alternative. In the gallery, someone, Velshii, by the sound of it, made a sound that was not quite a shout and not quite a cry and was both of those things. Ethan became aware that his hand was still under Sarah's hand. He became aware that she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't fully read yet, but one he intended to spend time learning. "It's done," he said. "It's done," she agreed. A pause. The settling period begins. I know. It's typically a year. I know. You'll be coming to the 6th hour every day. Yes. And not touching anything without instruction. Obviously. The gold in her chromatophores was luminous, unhidden, the most open he had ever seen it. Ethan, she said. Yes. I think, she said carefully, that my mother would have liked you very much. He looked at her. Amber eyes, warm skin, the careful steadiness that was not distance but something much harder to build, the steadiness of someone who had been through a great deal and had not let it make her smaller. I think, he said, she would have been proud of you. The gold deepened, steadied, stayed. Outside the chamber, the lower quarter residents were filling the corridor. Sarev was there, and the Velshii vendor, and a Drenni woman Ethan recognized from the shop. People who had been watching from the edges of something were coming closer now, and the sounds of the corridor were getting louder and warmer. Preva appeared at his elbow. The RGA review will still proceed, she said. I am not withdrawing it. The fund documentation will be referred to the regional auditor. The counselor knows this. Good, Ethan said. It will be a long process. She looked at him with the expression of someone permanently in a state of tactical readiness. But the preliminary outcome is what we needed. She looked at Sarah. Your vendor license will be renewed. Your residency permit is confirmed. Your provisional status under the RGA umbrella is approved pending their review. A pause. Don't do anything interesting for the next 60 days. I'll try, Sarah said. Preva nodded once, with the efficiency of someone who considers further words unnecessary, and left. They stood in the corridor for a while. The crowd around them, warm and loud, Velshii and Drenni and Kethani, and somewhere behind him, 2 other humans from the station who had apparently come to watch, which he hadn't known until this moment. The private confirmation, Sarah said. Yes. I said after the tribunal. You did. The tribunal is concluded. He looked at her. In the corridor light, the warm copper and amber of a woman who had decided, 23 days ago in the back room of her shop, to let herself be found by something, and who was now in this corridor looking at him with clear eyes. What does the private confirmation require? He asked. 2 people, she said, and a promise. He was quiet for a moment. The settling year, he said. We're going to figure each other out, properly, without the pressure of the council or the claim or any of this. Yes. And at the end of it, or wherever we are at the end of it, we decide together what we want. Yes. But right now, he said, you want the promise. Right now, she said, I want the promise. He looked at her. Sarah Vell, he said, I don't know everything about you yet. I know you take your midday meal at the 12th hour exactly and become unreasonable if it's late. I know you keep better records than anyone I've ever met. I know your hands know what to do when the rest of you is somewhere else. I know you are the best pharmacist on this station, and that 300 people are better off because you exist and kept working even when the world was trying to make you stop. He paused. I promise to keep showing up at the 6th hour. And to not touch anything without instruction, and to figure the rest out as we go. The gold in her throat was so bright it looked like light. Ethan Cole, she said, I know you read an entire legal code in 4 hours because someone told you it was complicated. I know you drink your morning beverage too quickly. I know you get quiet when something matters. I know you followed a thread that my mother started and finished what she couldn't. She stopped. I promise to teach you everything I know, and to tell you when you're wrong, and to figure the rest out with you. In the corridor outside the Bond Council chamber of Vel Thar Station, in the warm and crowded noise of people who had been waiting for something to change finally changing, they stood and looked at each other. A human and a Kethani woman with amber eyes. 2 people beginning. Equals. Epilogue. In the weeks that followed, the station medical compound supply fund was formally reinstated under RGA oversight. Saravel's vendor license was renewed, and within 3 months, the supply fund had provided resources for her to expand the shop's capacity and hire a Drenny apprentice. The RGA review of the 6 prior non-Kethani tribunal rejections was completed the following year. Its findings led to a significant revision of the Velara provision and the cultural incompatibility clause. Senior Counselor Drevath Khan retired at the end of the review cycle. His son left the station. Ethan Cole renewed his engineering posting for another 3 years. At the end of the settling year, on a morning at the 6th hour, when the copper light came through the windows of the lower quarter shop, and the compounds were labeled and the instruments were in their places, they confirmed what they already knew. It wasn't complicated in the end. It never had been. It had just required someone to sit down on a wall. End of story. Title: Alien males refused to marry her, until one human made a dangerous proposal. Channel: Alien Girl Stream, Romantic. Word count, runtime, ~61-62 min at 160 WPM. Film DNA, James 2016.